Hey everybody, welcome to Money's No Object. I am your host, Dylan Howell. This is episode number 94 of our YouTube channel and podcast, and I cannot be more excited to continue sharing with you all personal finance topics that I think can be particularly useful to you in your personal financial journey. Today, what we're going to talk about, in the spirit of what I've been talking about this week, I've been talking about marriage and money. Today, naturally, I'm going to continue with that, and I'm going to talk about prenuptial agreements and if these are necessary, if these should be entered into. For those of you who don't know, I'm just going to, cover what they are as well, and what they entail, and then, really nail down on what situations in which they may be useful, and whether they may be useful to the masses or not. Before we get started though, if you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments as we go along, and I'd be glad to get back to you, any questions or comments you may have. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, then make sure that you subscribe there and leave me a review. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's good supplementary material for the things that I put out on my daily episodes, and so I think you guys would really enjoy that. And then if you need somebody to keep you accountable with your finances, if you need somebody to help you build a plan that will work for you in your specific situation, then I can definitely help you do that. Just go to my website, www.mnowithdylan.com, click on the Work with Dylan tab, and pick the financial coaching session type that would work best for you, and we can begin pushing towards your long-term financial dreams. So when people get divorced, what do we hear about the most often? Something that we hear about is, oh, I had to give up half of what we had. We had to split everything right down the middle. You have to split the assets. They got the car, I got the house, they got some of the bank account, they got some of the retirement accounts, and just splitting all these things as perfectly down the middle as possible. And that's not uncommon. And in fact, it is extremely common in divorces, especially those of individuals who've been together for some time. And that just plays right into what we're talking about today with prenuptial agreements, because all a prenuptial agreement is it's a contract that a married couple, that the two individuals enter into, that has something to do with the division of the assets, the division of the properties, and all of these different things that you may have to split up in case of a divorce. And just a spoiler alert, I am not a big fan of prenuptial agreements. Do I think they are unnecessary always? No. But in the vast majority of cases, I do think they are unnecessary, and I'll get into why as we move forward. But let's talk a little bit more about what they are, what they do, and how they can be beneficial to someone. Now, the prenuptial agreement particularly comes into play when somebody has money and somebody does not. That is typically when you see a prenuptial agreement come into play, because the individual who has money doesn't want the other individual to just marry them for their money and then divorce them later and take half of what they had. And that seems like an extremely logical idea. That seems like something that, you don't want somebody to just marry you for your money. I get it. And to a certain extent, I think that is true. But the issue comes in the place of trust. The issue comes in the place of, I'm marrying this person. Do I trust them with what I have? I'm marrying this person. Do I trust them to be good stewards of the money that will soon become both of our money? I mean, we've talked about that this week, how we combine our finances when we get married. And a prenuptial agreement kind of goes against that whole idea of combining your finances, because you're starting off your marriage from a place of, well, this is mine, this is yours, let's go ahead and draw the line now. And it kind of makes it to where just right off the bat, that you are not going to be working on the exact same thing. You're not going to be working the same financial plan pushing towards a long-term goal. I mean, it's almost impossible to do so if you know that this is all mine and this is all yours. Then there's going to be, like I said a moment ago, a natural lack of trust that's going to be in that relationship. And the individual who came in and didn't have money, if they accrue anything, they're gonna be like, oh, well, that's mine. Or if they work for anything, oh, that's mine. You've got yours and I've got mine, and all these types of things. And the biggest issue I think that there is with the prenup, with the prenuptial agreement, is that it's almost like you're planning for your divorce already. And who in the world needs to be planning their divorce right as they're getting married? And it's interesting. If you look at what divorce lawyers say, and you look at what divorce lawyers think are the biggest issues around prenuptial agreements, then one of the biggest issues that they have is when funds get what they call commingled, right? If two individuals buy a house together, that means they're commingling their assets. And this is, not in the best case for the individual who had the prenup written up and signed in the first place. It's not in that person's best interest anymore because they commingled their funds with their spouse. But as far as what we are talking about and what we want to do with combining our finances with our spouses and keeping things together and working towards the same plan, obviously, like I said the other day, you want to put as many things in both of your names as possible. And if you are not wanting to do that, then there is obvious distrust in that place. And you may have even been in a relationship, or you may be in a relationship where you shouldn't have gotten married in the first place. You shouldn't be marrying this individual if you are not trusting their motives and trusting their intent with you and with the things that you have. But let's get real quick. I want to kind of get this out of the way so we can push on and talk about why most people don't need them. But I want to talk to you about the one place that I do think prenuptial agreements can be useful. So here it is. If you have a substantial amount of assets, and when I say substantial, I mean, over $1 million in assets. If you are a millionaire and you are going to marry someone who has nothing, and maybe who you haven't known very long, and you're just building this relationship with this person, I think that a prenuptial agreement can be useful in that place, and it can be a safeguard for you. And it's not necessarily in that case a way to say this is mine and it's not yours, but it's a way to say as we build this relationship, there will be more trust. As we build this relationship, there will be more understanding of where you are and what you want, and the things that you plan to do with the things that we have, and whether or not that person is just in it for the money or not. And like I said earlier, even in this case, you still probably need to go through some marriage counseling in the beginning to really talk about these issues and talk about what is going to get in the way of you guys having a trust-filled marriage, and a marriage where you can work on things together and do things together. I think the prenup can be a good safeguard for you in that place, but there has to be extremely good communication in that place as well, because if there is a lack of communication, if you do not communicate exactly why you're doing it, and that there are honest motives behind it, and that you just want to make sure, since you've worked real hard to do what you've done, that it doesn't get squandered, and it's not a direct reflection on that person's character. And I think that's the problem in most cases, and that's something we're going to jump into a little while, is that the character of the individual who didn't have anything coming in seems to be questioned when you have to sign a prenup. And so, like I said, we'll get to that here in just a minute. But I think if you do have over $1 million in assets, then having your soon-to-be spouse sign a prenuptial agreement is probably not a bad idea. And it's even better of an idea if the following things are true. If you have a lot of assets and you are middle-aged or older, so you're in your early to mid 50s or 60s or 70s, then I think that's probably a really good idea, because you spent your life building up whatever this has been. And if you're in your 50s or 60s, statistically, this is not your first marriage, and this is not probably the individual that you are marrying's first marriage. And if it is, then even more reason to look at this as a potential red flag and a potential need for a prenuptial agreement. But again, there needs to be some counseling in place. There needs to be some talking and communication about exactly how you feel about marrying them and having what you have, and them not having anything that they are bringing to the table. And then not only the age of the individual that has money being a lot older, but if the age of the individual who is marrying the person with the money is a lot younger, then there may be a need for a prenuptial agreement there as well. Again, that is only if the individual who they are marrying has substantial assets, then there may be a need for a prenuptial agreement. But I just think that those are just fair and honest safeguards, because we see it all too often, right? You see, and this is not an attack on these individuals or a specific group of individuals, but this is just what you see. This is what has been portrayed in the media, and it is a younger woman marrying an older man for his money, or somebody who spent their whole life building something. Somebody who doesn't have anything marrying that individual and then divorcing them later and taking their money, or whatever it may be. We just don't want those types of things to happen. We don't want our hard work and our wealth squandered by making a bad decision going into a marriage, or thinking that we're making a good decision going into a marriage and yet not putting the safeguards in place. But again, I think at the baseline of all of this, at the baseline of everything that I'm talking about here, is a lack of trust and a lack of good relations with the other person. I mean, you really have to question what everybody's motives are. And even your soon-to-be spouse, you need to question what that individual's motives are. If they just love you for you, and that you guys have fun doing things, and you're, you have similar interests, and you're getting married, fine. That's what is supposed to happen. You're supposed to have somebody that is your best friend and that you can do things with and that you can enjoy your life with. But if the person is, maybe has bad spending habits, or has bad habits around money, and those are things that need to be hashed out and need to be talked about before you enter marriage, before you enter this place where you are combining everything. And so let's talk about those individuals who do not need to have a prenup and why they do not need to have one. So I honestly think that most of you out there do not need prenuptial agreements when you're going into a marriage. I think that especially for those where there's not a substantial amount of money at risk in these situations, then there doesn't need to be anything done, obviously. Or some substantial amount of assets, then we really don't need to be doing anything in the place of prenuptial agreements. Now, I hear this really often, and this is kind of frustrating, and this is kind of arrogant by the individuals who want prenups in these situations. And so I want to address this for just a moment. Some people say, oh, well, I am going to be a lawyer or a doctor, and this other person is not going to have a career like that. So should I sign a prenup? Should we get a prenup to where, what's mine is mine and what's theirs is theirs, because maybe they're only marrying me because I'm a doctor. Let me tell you this. If somebody is marrying somebody because they are a doctor or a lawyer, and that person wants a prenup signed, I just want you to know that doctors and lawyers, just statistically, are typically not great with their money. Now, why are they not great with their money? Because they've racked up tons of debt, and most of them live above what they are really making. They are trying to keep up with other doctors and lawyers. Most of them are not very, very good with their money. And if you are simply saying that, oh, well, I'm going to have a high-powered career, so I'm going to have all this stuff, and I don't want my spouse to have all this stuff, then you have issues. You have issues with trusting the individual that you're about to marry. You have issues building something with someone else, and not just being selfish with what you have and what you've worked for on your own. Because honestly, it doesn't matter if you're a doctor and lawyer or whatever other high-powered career you may have, and that you're making really good income or whatever else. Income is not the issue here. Income is not what we're talking about. We are talking about assets. We are talking about properties. We are talking all these different types of things. Now I know your income is going to help you purchase those types of things, but that's going to be something you want to do with your spouse. And let's not get it twisted. If you are married to somebody who has a high-powered career, you also have roles in your marriage. Just because you may not be the individual bringing home the bacon, so to say, then you have roles in your marriage. For instance, I just want to put this out there because this is a situation that my wife and I are in right now. I've told you guys previously that my wife is pregnant, and we're really excited about that. And as you guys know, I'm getting a PhD in finance, and I teach courses at the university, and my wife is a paralegal, and so since I'm in the PhD program, she is bringing home a good salary, and so we want her to keep working. Well, I have a much more flexible schedule than she does, so we've decided that when we have our child, then I will stay home with our child multiple days a week. That will be my role in that place. You have to be willing to take on roles that are necessary for the good of your family. Just because your role may not be making the money, that does not mean that you are not a valuable asset to that family. That does not mean that you are not a valuable asset to the individual who is making the money. You are an extremely valuable asset to the individual who is making the money. And so I don't want to get that twisted with you individuals who are going into a marriage where maybe there aren't a lot of assets, but there's a lot of income potential. When there's that income potential, that doesn't mean anything to me. You don't need a prenup. You need to find your roles within that marriage. Now, I have an issue if you're not willing to play your role. I have an issue if you're just going to marry somebody with a high-powered career and lay on it. Like, I have an issue with that, right? But that needs to be ironed out before you ever get into a marriage with somebody. That has to be ironed out, or else it's going to be painful regardless of a prenup or not. That marriage obviously wasn't built on trust and love and communication and understanding. That was built on something far more vain and far more selfish than that. And even further than all of this, even further than me saying you guys do not need a prenup if you were just in this place of one person's going to make a better income than the other. I think that if somebody is requiring that you sign a prenup before you get married to them, and neither of you have assets, okay? Because I've talked about the situations when I think a prenup may be legitimate. But if neither of you have any assets and you're just beginning your life together, and that person's going to have a really good job and they're trying to force a prenup on you, then you should not marry that person. Because quite obviously, see, because this is the thing. Not only does a prenup give the individual who has assets an upper hand, not only does it create distrust, not only does it give them rights to their money that you will not have as their spouse, it gives them a way out. It gives them an easy out. And that's what I was saying earlier about, I said it makes divorce easier. It makes divorce like you're planning for a divorce. And we don't want to plan for our divorce. We don't want to make it easy to just step right out of the institution of marriage. Marriage is supposed to last a lifetime. It's supposed to be until death do us part, until, as long as we both shall live. That's how long marriage should last. And so just making an easy way out for yourself is selfish. It lacks trust in the other individual, and it questions your motives for getting in the marriage in the first place. Like, if you're the person with the money or with the income potential, especially the person with the income potential, if you're that person and you're saying, well, I have to have a prenup or I'm not, getting married to this person, then you probably don't need to get married to that person, because you're obviously not in a place where you love and trust them. You're obviously not in a place where they are somebody that you can go to and trust to do things and deal with your money. And I mean, because that's the crazy thing. And we've talked about this earlier this week. Again, we want to combine our finances. And the reason we want to do so is so we can all be on the same page and be going in the same direction. But if we are not combining our finances, then we're just going in two different directions. We are veering off in different directions. And if you're doing that, and one person has the income and the money, and the other person may have a lesser job, or not be bringing home income, or whatever it may be, then it's just going to make it easier and easier to just fall apart in your marriage and be in a place where you're not going to trust each other. You're going to resent each other. You're going to resent your spouse who makes all the money. You're going to look down upon your spouse who doesn't bring home as much money as you, or brings home less money than you do. It automatically creates this power dynamic that does not need to be in your marriage. You guys need to be an equally yoked couple of individuals who are pushing forward in the same direction and are trying to get to one ultimate outcome. And if you are not doing that, then what's happening is one person's going one way and the other person's going another. And you are not growing closer as a couple. You are growing farther apart. And that's the last thing that we want. The last thing that we want in our marriage is to grow further apart. We want to grow closer. And the way that we grow closer is by doing things together, combining things, trusting each other, having hard conversations, communicating with one another how we feel about the money that we're making, or how we feel about what that individual does for a living, or what that individual does on a day-to-day basis. Like I said earlier, we don't want people just laying up on it because their spouse makes good money. There needs to be a purpose for what you do. There needs to be a direction and some goals, and those need to be clearly communicated. I think that just about everything that we talk about today, just about everything that I talk about when it comes to prenuptial agreements, can be fixed, can be avoided, if we have honest conversations with the individual who we are engaged to be married to. I think if you can have honest conversations, if you can talk to them, and I don't mean once, I mean many times, and if you can really see where their heart is, see where their mind is around money, where their mind is around what you're going to do for a living and what they're going to do for a living, or the money that you have bringing in and the money that they have bringing into the marriage, then I think it's going to make a lot more sense for you all. I think it's going to be a lot more beneficial for you all, and you'll see that there is no need for the prenuptial agreement. Now, there may be a need for you all not to marry one another, but there is no need for the prenuptial agreement, because if you still come to that conclusion, and neither of you have substantial assets that you're bringing into the marriage, then there are much bigger issues than the money. The issues there come with, I don't trust, I don't believe that this person's going to do what they say they're going to do. I don't have faith in what that person's going to do, and or maybe somebody's just really selfish with what they have, and that can definitely happen. But you have to have the conversations. You have to make it difficult on yourself. I understand, but if you make it difficult now, if you have the hard conversations now, if you work through these things now, then you will save yourself pain on the back end. Look, I understand that you don't want to lose what you worked so hard for. I understand that you don't want to squander away things that have taken you time and effort and skill to build, or have taken you time and effort and skill to achieve. And so I get that, right? I 100% understand. But then the question becomes, what do you love? Okay? Do you love money? Because we know the Bible does not say that money is the root of all kinds of evil. The Bible says that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And that is the issue. It's a heart problem. It is a problem in your heart if you are loving your money and loving the potential of your money more than you're loving the individual, more than you're loving your potential spouse. And I think that's just really at the heart of all of it, is we have a heart issue. We have this issue where we think that money is bigger than the relationship, and that what we have or what we could potentially have is bigger than the relationship. And I don't want to give, just a cop out to those who do go about trying to get their hands on the money of individuals who have a lot more than them. I don't want to, give them a free ride here. I don't, because it's a hard issue for them as well. It's an issue that, you are chasing after somebody simply for their money, or it's an issue that that you are manipulating that individual's mind to make them think that you really, really love who they are, just for the money. And so all of those things, it's just big, hard issues that Is it going to be perfect? No. Or is there a perfect answer to any of these questions? No, because I'm sure there are going to be plenty of marriages that look to be built on rock and they are built on sand, and that is unfortunate, and that is a big issue. But it is not a reason not to try to work together. It's not a reason to not put things together. It is not a reason to get a prenuptial agreement and have this safeguard for yourself for the future already in place, because all that's going to do is erode the marriage faster. All it's going to do is make the thing that you don't want to happen a lot easier to occur, right? It's going to, because look, even if you have a prenuptial agreement, the cost of going through a divorce is going to be astronomical. And not only is that cost going to be high, then you're also going to be dealing with the commingled funds, right? If you have a substantial amount of those, if you've been married for some period of time. And so it's just messy. It's just all very, very messy. Marriage is messy, but you have to communicate. You have to try to work together. And if you are in one of those weird places where you have a lot of money and you are marrying someone who doesn't, then yeah, that's just weird. There's weirdness there, and a prenup can be a good little safeguard for you in that place. But otherwise, if you are entering a marriage with just anything, really, I feel like anything less than $1 million, then you need to try to work that out before you ever get married. That way your marriage will work long term, and that you can have the life you've always wanted. You can work with your spouse, taking on your roles, taking on the goals that you have for your life together, and you can just push headlong into it. So guys, thanks for watching this video. If you could, go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below if you haven't done so already. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, then please subscribe there and leave me a review. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan. And that'd be really good supplementary material to the episodes that I put out every single day. And then if you need help, if you need somebody to work one-on-one with you in your personal financial situation, then all you have to do is go to my website, www.mnowithdylan.com, click on the Work with Dylan tab, and pick the financial coaching session type that would work best for you, and we can begin pushing towards your long-term financial goals. So tune in tomorrow as I talk about questions that you need to ask your significant other before marriage, and questions that you need to ask your significant other in order to get a better feel for how they feel about money and how you guys are going to coexist in the area of your personal finances. So thanks for tuning in to this episode of Money's No Object. I am your host, Dylan Howell. God bless.